These Path of Exile 2 tips will make your experience playing this game way better. Path of Exile 2 is an expansive, insane game for an early release launch, and I've played it already 100 hours, and I'm honestly having a lot of fun playing it. So before we get into everything, thank you Path of Exile 2 for sponsoring today's video. Grinding Gears Games has created an absolute masterpiece here, and if you haven't already, down below in the description and pinned comment, you can get early access with free currency and a lot of different stuff for 30 bucks for POE 2. And the good thing is you get all the free currency on top of the full early access launch, but when the game comes out in full, you're going to be able to play it completely for free at that point. You get it for the early access price, which is 30 bucks. Now, if you're interested, let's go into Path of Exile 2 and making your life way easier in game with these tips and things you should avoid. The first thing I've already seen on a couple of my videos, you're absolutely a beginner and have no idea what you're doing if you don't apparently have stash tabs, meaning at least one premium stash tab and the gems stash tab in specific. So this one specifically helps you organize your orbs. You have to have this. You have to have it because it makes organization so much better, and it allows you to just keep all of that kind of stuff and upgradable things in here. So that way it's easy to find and easy to distribute. Saves you a ton of time and organization. The same thing is you need at least one premium stash tab. The more you have, the better, but one will do for early game. Now, how this works is once you buy one of these premium stash tabs, you can then right click on it and actually click that check mark and set it for public. And what that does is you can then choose each item individually priced, and you can right click on an item if you find some sort of item, whether it's uncommon that people like high level uncommon items to then start upgrading and crafting their gear, or just decent pieces you find, uniques maybe that you find. You can put them in here and sell them for specific currencies. So you can do an exact price and you can get a bunch of free exalted orbs this way. So I would highly recommend setting this up. And again, all you have to do is go to the microtransaction shop down here. From early access of the game, you should get 300 points by default. And you should come in here and buy this currency stash tab. You can see that's the one I was talking about. And then you can also upgrade to a premium stash tab of at least one tab that only costs 10, or you could do the bundle here for 165. Other than that, eventually you may want to look in grabbing this Delirium stash tab while it's on sale because eventually it'll be needed. And also I would recommend buying the Essence stash tab. This is another good one for your essences. As you collect them, they'll all be in an easy place to sort like that. This organization with the free coins they give you will make your time playing this game a million times better. Next is if an item has quality, especially sockets on it, pick it up, find it, come back and salvage it, because you want to make sure when you salvage it that you're getting these materials such as armor scrap for upgrading the quality of your armor to make it more powerful, and things like blacksmith whetstone so you can get more upgrades for your quality on your weapons, and the artificer's orbs so we are able to add rune sockets to your gear, because once you hit endgame and you find gear that you really love and is really good, you want to make sure you have enough of these stocked out, though you can just go max it out and upgrade it super easy. If you don't collect this stuff as you're going, you're going to have to trade for it later. You can come to any vendor in any town, disenchant items. Early on, if you have to sell some for gold to buy some earlier weapons, that's perfectly fine on a new character. But once you start crossing into even like maybe level 10, you really want to look into basically salvaging almost everything at that point. And that's because the blue items get you this transmutation shard, which becomes an orb of transmutation, which then you use to upgrade normal white items into magic items, which is going to be great for crafting early and later down the line. You're going to need a bajillion of those things to actually craft your perfect gear you're trying to get, as well as early in the game, one modifier that's the right one can make you honestly really powerful early in the game or on a brand new character. Every time you see a yellow item, you don't have to pick up all the magic items once you level up high enough, but every time you see a rare item, you make sure you pick it up because you get a regal shard, and that regal shard then becomes a regal orb. The regal orb turns a magic item into a rare item. You get so many of the original orbs that it's not necessarily as important later game, but having enough regal orbs to turn items into rares to continue upgrading them, you're going to need a bunch of them. You don't want to have to buy them later. Next, when you're crafting armor and you're saving up for the quality upgrades that I talked about earlier in the video by salvaging equipment, you're going to get again the blacksmith's whetstone for your martial weapons. You're going to get the armor scrap for your armor, and you're going to get the arcanist etcher for your wand, staff, or scepter to be able to upgrade the quality of those. You can upgrade to a maximum of 20% quality buff, meaning your armor essentially in this case goes up by 20%. Now these typically only give like a 2 or 3% buff, so you're gonna have to use multiple of them to upgrade one individual piece to its max. And maybe it works with more upgrades, but when I put, for instance, one upgrade into this helmet and then went to salvage it, it actually gave me 0 of the armor scrap back. So you don't necessarily want to use these early on pieces that you're going to be replacing every couple levels. You want to wait until you get a little bit higher level with the really good affix rolls you want on it, and then you can go in here and upgrade the quality and make it even more powerful. I would definitely wait to do that because you only get so much of this stuff early game, even as you level. Now keep in mind, if you are missing some of that stuff and you do want to upgrade, you don't necessarily have to wait because you can always talk to the vendor and do currency exchange once you get past the original part of the campaign into the cruel axe. I actually want some blacksmith's whetstone, and I have, for instance, an overabundance of exalted orbs. You can then get 9 blacksmith's whetstones for 1 exalted orb. So if you have 20 exalted orbs that you don't need, you can get a lot of these whetstones, meaning you don't have to farm for them. So keep that in mind. It's a great to currency exchange in some retrospects going forward for items that are more expensive, but it's really great to do in a downward direction where you're taking some of your more expensive orbs and translating them to other things like this that you can use to upgrade your gear, so you don't have to farm for those individual things over and over and over again. Now, I would highly recommend getting a loot filter, so that way you can actually see what good items are on the ground, what's rare, what's not. I'll put in the description a link to the loot filter and how to install it. Ideally, the easiest way so that way you can see a lot of the good gear that's dropping so you don't miss rare items is click on that link and download that filter file. Then all you have to do is come into your game settings here and then click on this folder and drop that filter file right into that Path of Exile 2 folder. You can see right here, it's immediately on that list. Then you'll just exit out of your settings menu, come back in, and you can reselect it here. And this will make all of your rare items and stuff pop up on your screen in bright colors, so that way you know you're not missing anything. Color code it so that way you know exactly kind of what you're looking for. It really helps to not miss some of these rare orbs and things like that on the ground that would normally just appear in a regular gray color. Another tip is just don't do your Trial of Chaos. It is absolutely horrible. It's so horrifying. It's basically harder for me than the entire game so far, even the Cruel Act. So you're going to be able to do your second ascendancy in Act 3, and you're going to be able to do it by completing the Trial of Chaos by going to the Temple of Chaos up here. Now the problem with that is, even though it says monster level 38, if you don't have the specific things I'm going to tell you, it's going to be an absolutely horrible time. One being the reason you should be saving some of your flasks. So for the Trial of Chaos, especially for your ascendancy, you have to go through 4 trials. Each trial, you'll be taking a bunch of damage from enemies, completing the objectives, and then fight a horrible boss at the end. Now, if you die at any point in this run, you have to start all the way over and over again. Maybe you're just good at the game and you don't have to do that, but I had to do it along with a lot of other people. More than likely, odds are, once you hit level 38, you're not going to be able to complete it. Don't waste your time with that ascendancy and those ascendancy points. Just keep chugging along. At like level 45 or 50, come back to it. I'm telling you, that advice would have saved me about 20 tries at that thing and given me back like 4 or 5 hours of my life. But when you go back to do it, you need to make sure you have a flask, which is why you should be on the lookout for it now. And that is that you should be getting flasks and upgrading them so that way you have at least 1 flask that has both increased amount recovered, so you get more healing for actually using the flask, and it gains charges per second. The reason that's important is because there are no wells. So once you start beating the couple of few enemies that are in there, you're not going to replenish a lot of your charges. Once you get done with a section, you can then spend a minute or two and wait around for all of your charges to refill, so that way you can have max charges going into the next section. I believe in you. Over level for it. That's all I got to say. Another tip is to use your weapon set passive points, and I'm going to show you how to do it. I've not done it, as you can see, because I'm basically a terrible person. I really have had no clue, and I know other people don't know how to use them, so I'm going to show you how to use them while I kind of figure them out myself. So ideally, the way they work is they're not extra passive points that you get. The way it works is, for instance, we have one-handed damage up here for one-handed weapons, so we'll be using a one-handed sword and shield for that. Down here we have two-handed weapon passives. We can say, okay, our weapon number 1 set is our one-handed weapon, so that's the one we're going to want to take our one-handed weapon with. So what we can do is say weapon set 1. We can say, okay, we're going to take that skill for one-handed weapons. You can see it's highlighted in red. We're then going to immediately go and take our second one, and we're going to put it in this two-handed weapon talent. So that way we have our two-handed weapon set getting a two-handed talent, and one-handed weapon set getting a one-handed talent. We're then going to select that, and you can see that now it's green. So you can see if I have both these selected with different sets, if I were to take these off, I have 10 total skill points. But if I go to weapon set 1 and I select this one, weapon set 2 and I select this one, it still shows 9 skill points. If I hit apply points for both of these passives with only spending 1 skill point, and that's because they're set along with my weapon sets. So when I have my weapon set 2 out, it will be using this specific talent. When I have my weapon set 1 out with my one-handed sword and shield, it will be using this talent in the red. So it's not getting both of them combined, but again, it's separating it so that way you can have 2 different weapon sets, 2 different skill setups for both, and use both of them by just simply swapping to it and it using the correct talents. I want to mention this really quick too about refunding passive points. So as you begin to level up, it doesn't matter that the earlier skills were done first. When you refund a skill, as the higher level you get, all of the skills are more expensive. They're all going to cost 2,600 per one. So you should really plan out your build to try and minimize how many you have to refund, because if you have to respec 30 of these points, it's going to cost you 60k, and you may or may not have that. So it can be expensive. Also, when you do the weapon set points, make sure you're paying attention to those again, because if you have to unallocate one, it costs 2,600. If you have to unallocate the other one, it also costs 2,600. So it basically doubles up on you and costs an insane amount of gold to refund. And another one, specifically when you set up your passive points, please, you need to do these with some thought, because if you don't, they cost extra to refund. Instead of 2,600, they cost 13,000 a piece. So if I wanted to go on this path instead, I have to refund all 4 of these, and that's like 50 something thousand gold. That's over half of what I have. That would suck. So don't do that. Now, a quick leveling tip and something that you should know and be paying attention to while you're playing the axe. Each given axe, and I'll put these all on the screen in a second in case you want to reference them, have specific passive points you can get by playing specific areas. Now, especially if you're replaying on cruel difficulty, one of the things I would always recommend is trying to get rid of all of these bosses that you can, because A, they give you decent loot for your level, and they also give you specific things. Like this boss gives you 2 skill points. 2 skill points and 2 passive points are a big deal, because eventually you get enough of them that you're like 20 extra passive points in, and you're like 300-400% more powerful because of those extra points. So make sure you're getting those. Again, I'll put all those in the axe that they are up on the screen so you can see them, but make sure you're taking care of these bosses and some of the side quests and things like that. For instance, this one gives us plus 30 to spirit permanently. Other ones in Act 2, for instance, gives us again 2 passive skill points. And even this one that gives you plus 10% to lightning resistance and permanently. So you want to make sure you're getting all of these on both acts and both playthroughs. You can go back and forth between either one and get any ones that you missed. So make sure you go back and get those as quickly as possible, because they're instant power upgrades for your character. Speaking of orbs, we're going to talk about crafting for a second. I have a video on my channel going deep into crafting, but ideally things like the Regal Orb and the Exalted Orbs are much more rare and a little bit harder to find, and they're more valuable in terms of what it costs to trade for them, etc. So you don't want to waste them if you don't have to. So when it comes to crafting, let's take these sandals, for instance. Now, the correct path to take with these sandals is to first turn them into a magic item with an Orb of Transmutation, meaning we're going to use that Orb of Transmutation and put our first affix on it. Each magic item can have up to 2 affixes, and each magic item can specifically have 1 suffix and 1 prefix, which I'll go over in just a second. Next, we'll use our Orb of Augmentation to take it up to 2 affixes. So if we use our orb to turn this into a magical item, and then we use our Orb of Augmentation on it, we now have 2 magical attributes on this weapon. That top one is an implicit that comes on the weapon. That doesn't count. That's just something that's implicit to the type of specific weapon it is. A lot of different weapons and pieces of gear have specific implicits on them, so just keep that in mind. But now we have 2 affixes on this hammer that we've crafted. One mistake I've made before is you want to make sure, so that way this has 2 magic affixes on it before you upgrade it to a rare. For instance, if it's a magic with 1 affix on it and you use this Regal Orb to upgrade it to a rare item, it's then only going to have 2 affixes on it as a rare, and that kind of sucks, because then you have to use Exalted Orbs on it to continue adding modifiers. So if you wanted to add 2 more, you'd have to use 2 Exalted Orbs, versus where you'd only have to normally use 1 Exalted Orb, because you could have just used this Orb of Augmentation to put the second modifier or affix on the gear before you turn it into a rare. Also keep in mind that each magical item has one prefix and one suffix only. It can only have 2 affixes. A rare item can have 3 maximum of each. So a rare item, you can see here, this one has what looks like 4 and what looks like has 2 suffixes. Those 4 prefixes are actually 3 prefixes. The top 2 lines are a hybrid affix, meaning it's an affix that has 2 actual stats that it gives. A rare item can only have 3 of each. Given that we have 3 prefixes on this weapon and 2 suffixes, is 1 spot left. Where do we think that goes? That goes to a suffix. So since we know that goes to a suffix and we want to use an Exalted Orb to add a new modifier to max this out at 6, that means we know we're getting a suffix. So one important thing you can do is you want to know if it's even worth it to do that, like if you're trying to get a specific modifier on the weapon. So on this two-handed mace, we already, like we said, had all of our prefixes. We already had 3 maximum, right? We can't get any more prefixes unless we use some sort of orb to randomly remove one. So if one of the things we wanted, as an example, was chaos damage, we cannot get chaos damage. It's impossible right now because, again, we've already maxed out our prefixes at 3. So if we're rolling this last one with an Exalted Orb to hope to get that, it's impossible. It's not going to happen. But you want to know that before you do it, which is why something like this POE DB website is good, because it has all of the information for all the possible rolls for the weapons, the affixes, all that stuff, which I'll include that link down in the description. It's great to reference when crafting your gear. Keep that in mind while you're crafting. It will save you a bunch of heartache and a bunch of orbs later down the line when you really need them. Trust me. Thank you, Path of Exile 2, for sponsoring today's video. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Happy to answer them. If this helped you, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and check out either one of these Path of Exile videos for more awesome stuff. Thanks.